Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Mobalytics video. Today we're taking a look at the most underrated champions to play in every single role in Season 12. Before we get started, if you want to find out any more about these champions with builds, runes, guides and plenty more, click the link in the description to check out our website. If you like what you see, download our desktop app and give it a go in your next game. First off, we have the top lane, and the first underrated champion in this role is Zac. Zac's been having a pretty great season in multiple roles. Primary the jungle as you'd expect, but also in the top lane and even support as well. Top lane Zac is a classic tanky top laner, except he brings a lot more to the table than you'd think. Zac has inbuilt sustain with his blobs, he has good CC and trading power with his basic abilities, and he also has fantastic mobility in his E, which is great for both setting up or escaping ganks. Zac's ultimate is another ability that makes him very difficult to gank, and he's very effective in this role both when receiving lots of ganks from his own jungler and if he's playing weak side, as he's just so hard to actually kill. Zac can build either full tank, tanky AP, or even a bit more damage orientated, and it's surprising just how much he can actually deal, both in burst windows and over time. Outside of the lane phase, Zac brings everything that he does when he's in the jungle, but usually with a bit more experience and more items, meaning he's much harder to play against. Zac is such a fantastic counter to so many immobile and static champions with his long range engage and crowd control, meaning he's just brilliant against the popular enchanters and hyper carries in this meta. Zac is also fantastic at disrupting assassins and dive comps with his insane amount of disengage and crowd control. What can you do when you're a Zed when you're just constantly locked up and bounced around into oblivion? Overall, if you want to add another tank to your top lane arsenal, Zac is a very potent, very underrated, underplayed and fun champion to go for. Next up we've got Lilia, and she's been buffed so many times that she's actually feeling a little bit too strong right now. Again, like Zac, she's most commonly played in the jungle, but is having fantastic results in that top lane. Lilia is a great pick into low range matchups due to that movement speed and mid range poke that she offers. She can dart in and out of trades with that movement speed and constantly bully her enemies down with her Q and her E. And when she gets a little bit braver, she can dive in with her W to finish them off. Lilia does still struggle against some champions with high mobility like Riven, but there's not too many champions like that can deal with her due to her movement speed. Positioning and playstyle is key on this champion. You have to weave in and out of fights and pick those around your Q, but if you can pull it off, it's really effective. Lilia is brilliant at 1v2ing due to her AoE damage, and that CC on her ultimate too makes this so very effective when she's in the lead. Outside of the lane phase, top lane Lilia provides most of the strength she does as a jungler, but with more damage and more experience, which means similar to Zac, she's just so much harder to kill. Lilia's damage over time, her ability to thrive in extended fights and impact those big clutch teamfight moments make her a brilliant pick right now, so give her a go. Finally, the third top laner in this underrated list today is Azir. Yes, that's right, the Sharuma Pokey Pigeon is having a brilliant time in the top lane. So why top and not mid? Well, it's kind of similar to Kayle. You get to scale up easier without having to constantly react to the skirmishes and fights that happen around the middle of the map. And you can also abuse your ranged advantage far more often in the top lane due to the type of champions you most commonly come up against. If you set up a freeze in the top lane, you can farm for ages without much risk at all, and if you can manage the wave properly and keep it there, you can do this for a long time. By doing this, you get gold and experience risk free, which means you're going to scale and then you're going to be able to carry it in the late game. Azir can poke down his lane opponent very often, and due to the mobility of his E and his QE combo, he's actually really hard to gank as well, especially post 6 when you add in that ultimate. These abilities make him really hard to dive too, meaning he's very capable of outplaying multiple enemies under his own tower and when he's under pressure. As you will probably know by now, Azir scales like an absolute monster, and those soldiers late game deal some really unforgiving damage. This champion does have a pretty high skill ceiling, and he'll take a lot more practice than most other champions. But if you enjoy him and can get on with him, he's a brilliant pocket pick in that top lane. Let's move on to the jungle now, and in the first place pick we have Elise. Elise has been overshadowed for this entire season, and honestly not enough people are actually playing her. Elise fits that similar style of play to those other early game champions like Rek'Sai and Nidalee, who can completely destroy the map before any chance of a late game. Elise's clear is decent, but it's those early ganks that are really what make her so punishing, especially if you can get the hang of landing that cocoon. Due to Elise having access to 6 abilities at level 3, you're probably one of the strongest level 3 champions in the jungle at this point. She has damage, mobility and crowd control all at this point in the game, meaning if you can abuse this in those early ganks and invades, you can get snowballing so quickly. Elise's repel also means she's brilliant at tower diving due to it dropping aggro. This allows you to really punish enemies who are behind and push your lead when you have one, especially against low mobility champions that don't have their summoners. Elise does fall off like other early game junglers, and she's not going to have the team fighting impact of some other big picks, but if you can snowball the early game, push your lead, and carry that early to mid game super hard, she is a brilliant pick this season, despite not being that popular. Mordekaiser still boasts a super juicy win rate in the jungle, and he has done for most of this season, but still, not many people are playing it. Mordekaiser in general is a bit of a pub stomping champion, as people don't really know how to kill him and end up just inting him because of this. Mordekaiser's jungle clear is fine, his early ganks are fairly strong and his objective control and dueling potential are absolutely brilliant once he's got his ultimate. You can build him like the traditional tanky AP bruiser, or you can go more tanky and just sponge a ridiculous amount of damage, while still dishing out plenty for yourself. Mordekaiser is really hard to play against when he's a bit fed, and he does seem to get a little bit unkillable. This seems to happen much more often in the jungle, where Mordekaiser isn't as prone to being camped and put behind. He does have a healthy amount of early game damage too, so if you gank for those lanes with crowd control, you're more than likely to get ahead. Mordekaiser, when he is ahead, is unkillable, unduelable, and easily strong enough to carry a lot of games. Our third jungle pick for this video is Poppy. In my opinion, she's been criminally underrated for ages, whether it's in the top lane or the jungle, but it's in the jungle where people genuinely don't seem to realise how amazing she can be. She's got tons of tools in her kit, and in my eyes it's actually a little bit overloaded, but people overlook this probably because she's a Yordle. Poppy has an okay clear, but it's those ganks and skirmishes which she really does thrive in. She's got really high burst damage, she's got shielding, she's got crowd control, anti-mobility, and of course the ridiculously good ultimate. These tools make her an absolute menace to deal with, and if she's good enough, it can feel unplayable. Poppy's early ganks are very punishing, especially against enemies who are overextending, and the W preventing enemy mobility is such a good tool at shutting down so many of those popular picks right now. One of the best things about Poppy too is that ultimate, and sending the jungler back to their base whilst you smite any objective risk-free. Poppy offers so much in teamfights too. She's great at diving backlines, and she's incredible at peeling for her own as well, as her kit is so well designed to do so. For some reason, when Poppy gets fed as well, she just seems so much quicker than the rest of the champions. Probably a little bit to do with her itemization and the fact she just comes charging towards you, which is a pretty terrifying sight to behold. If you haven't tried Poppy jungle yet, it's definitely worth giving it a go. Plus, next week, along with Mordekaiser, she's getting some huge buffs too, so now's the perfect time to try it. Let's go down to the mid lane now, and our first pick is Kennen. Over the years, we've always seen Kennen in the top lane, as a ranged bully that focuses on keeping the enemy top laner at bay while scaling up and getting ready to join in those teamfights. However, recently people have started playing him in the mid lane and making use of his early game damage and AoE CC earlier. Kennen is so much better than people realise throughout the early game, as he can set up ganks so easily, he's very difficult to gank with his E, and he can fare well in the majority of lanes. It's really in those early teamfights though that he absolutely shines in. The roams bot with his ultimate can be devastating, and when it comes to contesting those early dragons or heralds, he can always be there and have a huge impact with that ultimate. Since those teleport nerfs back towards the start of the season, Kennen has become a lot less relevant, as those ganks were a huge part of his influence in games. But when you pop him in the mid lane, he can do this just as often as he ever could in the top lane anyway. The roam heavy meta of mid lane right now is fantastic for this champion, so if you shove those waves and constantly look for ganks, you can easily carry games very effectively from mid lane Kennen. The main vulnerability of mid lane Kennen is his mid range. He gets outranged by quite a few mid lane picks, so he's probably not as blind pickable the higher rank that you go. Think of him kind of similar to other low to mid range mages that will always struggle against those super long range champions, unless you can all in often and prevent them from poking you. Despite this though, Kennen is a very spicy pocket pick to play in the mid lane, and because of his incredibly low popularity, people won't be ready for all those strengths you can bring. Our second mid lane pick is Cho'Gath. Now I still remember the days of running Deathfire Grasp on Cho'Gath mid all the way back in Season 2, and that was a lot of fun. Despite not having this item anymore though, it's still really enjoyable. Cho'Gath mid is actually hilarious when you think about how much damage and disruption you can constantly dish out. Most enemy mid lane champions get destroyed by Cho'Gath's silence, and after a few landed Qs you can often just all in whenever you want. Cho'Gath's base damage is surprisingly high, which makes him really difficult to lane against in the early game, and then when he hits level 6, this amount of burst damage is just ridiculous. Cho'Gath brings a ton of damage, CC, kill threat, and even objective control with his ultimate that translates into becoming a tanky monster even if he just builds full AP. Much like other underrated or niche mid lane picks, Cho'Gath is going to be harder to blind pick the higher up in rank you go. But for the majority of players, you can absolutely abuse people with this champion. No one really plays it, no one plays against it, and therefore you can win so many games by just going for kills early game and snowballing at a ridiculous pace. Our third and final underrated mid lane pick is Zilean. Zilean mid is absolute carnage, and honestly every time there's one in my game it just feels like a fiesta from start to finish. The constant bombs, the hilarious movement speed boosts, and of course the mad revivals with his ultimate. So how does Zilean mid work, and why is it so good and underrated? Well, to start with, Zilean has really good wave control with his bombs and can push the lane easily. He's also very hard to kill and very hard to gank. Yes, he may be fragile, but if he has his E up, he can just run away from the majority of danger. And you can't really dive him either because of his ultimate and those double bombs, which are so disruptive when you're looking to kill him. What really makes Zilean OP though, apart from all the things we've already mentioned, is his roaming. If you pick up boots too nice and early on and get yourself an Everfrost, and then just zoom around the entire map with your E, double bombing people and rooty tooting them with your Everfrost. Do this on repeat and make sure to chuck in a few Qs in the mid lane now and again to keep those waves under control, and you just basically play like a second jungler with a ridiculous amount of utility. This pick takes a very aggressive playstyle to pull off properly, as if all you do is sit in lane and farm, you're just not really going to do that much. What you want to do though is clear waves and roam to your heart's content, and you'll find out just how OP this champion can be, especially when partnered with those allied champions who just love having a Zilean on their team. Moving on to those underrated AD carries now, and this one is harder than the other roles, as there are a limited number of champions to pick from. We've ruled out some popular and well-performing picks like Yasuo and Karthus, and wanted to stick to the true AD carry picks. The first AD carry we're going to talk about today is Kog'Maw. Now Kog'Maw is known for his dependence on those enchanting supports like Lulu, Yuumi and Janna, and it's hard to disagree with the fact that he is just so much better with them. But either way, overall he's actually a very high performing AD carry despite being one of the least popular. Kog'Maw is all about positioning and efficiency, which are two of the most important traits of any AD carry main, especially the higher rank that you get. Maximising your CS and income whilst positioning yourself so you can burp all over your enemies and not get blown up in the process. Kog'Maw scales like a beast and there's no denying that, but actually his early to mid game trading and damage is a lot higher than you think, but due to the fact that people are so scared of fighting on him, they never actually realise how much damage they can deal here. As soon as you have those first few items, and more specifically Guinsoo's Rage Blade, you deal some unreal damage and can easily shred through enemy teams from quite a good distance. Kog'Maw also has really good level 2 fight potential with his auto QW and auto attacks, and in general he's a lot more dangerous in the lane phase than people think. If you do manage to get to that late game on this champion, play around your flash and your defensives, and you can genuinely 1v9 in nearly every single game, especially if you do actually have an enchanter up your sleeve. The second AD carry is going to be Ashe. Now recently she has risen back to popularity a tiny bit, but in no way in comparison to how popular she's been in the past, and she's still massively underrated. This weird ultimate spam cooldown build went round a while back, but honestly the attack speed on hit or crit builds are just so good, and they really do hurt. So you've got quite a few options in terms of your itemization on Ashe. You can go Kraken Slayer or Shield Bow, and you've got Phantom Dancer, Guinsoo's or Runans, and all of which just deal a really good amount of damage and allow you to burst and kite like a champion. I've been personally trying out the Kraken into PD Rush build and it feels so damn good. The damage boost you get and the attack speed steroid from Phantom Dancer make you simply melt your enemies if you can kite properly. Ashe has a lot of utility and useful things in her kit too, like the scouting ability in the E to constantly seek out the enemy jungler. She's got that global pick potential in her ultimate, and she's got a ton of slows that can completely destroy those champions who are prone to kiting. Like some of the other underrated picks in this list, Ashe is not the most blind pickable champion, but if you can pick her in a game where you know you can just kite the enemy picks forever, she's a great pick to go for this season. Finally we have Sivir, and she's another champion completely forgotten about so far this season. Sivir brings all the strengths she's always had, wave clear, push potential and team-wide utility in her ultimate, and as long as these things don't get changed too much, they will always be what you think about when you think of Sivir. Recently though, these massive benefits to this champion have been lost in the madness of this season, and people don't seem to realise just how strong she can actually be. Sivir also brings a huge amount of burst and poke with her lethality setup, which is by far the most popular route for her at the moment. This works in a similar way to that of Varus or Xayah, but with Sivir you also have the ability to completely get the hell out of there with your ultimate if the poking and sieging turns a bit ugly. It's actually very surprising and fairly funny when you realise how much burst damage you deal with Muramana and this lethality setup. I mean, you can sometimes literally one-shot people with your Q at max range. Then you've also got the traditional kite and crit setup, which some Sivir players still swear by. This build is still very impactful in those games and drafts when it seems a bit more appropriate. Either way though, Sivir's win rate is far more impressive than you think, and she's one of the safest and most reliable AD carries in the game even all of these years later. So that's the AD carries covered, and let's finish off this video with those 3 support picks. The first one is gonna be Zoe. This champion is absolutely bonkers, and a ton of players actually haven't got a Scooby-Doo what she does, and if you're one of those people, go into practice mode and have a look at how she works, as when you do, she's a lot easier to play against. Anyway, Zoe support offers a lot of the strength she does in the mid lane, but without having to worry about farming or anything else, and she can just focus on tunnel visioning, picking off and bursting down the enemy bot laners. Zoe has a crazy skill ceiling, and this is expressed with her burst combos, her summoner spell and item usage, and her limited but exceptional mobility. As a support, Zoe can look to poke down enemies with Q, line up picks and catches with her E, which extends over walls of course, and jump around being impossible to catch whilst dealing a stupid amount of damage. Zoe's roaming is also really potent too, as what can you do when you're farming in the mid lane and a bubble slaps you in the face and before you know it you've been sent back to the shopkeeper. Those summoner spells are really impactful too. In the bot lane you're in a 2v2, which means more summoner spells to get hold of, and just imagine getting involved and getting 2 exhausts, 3 flashes, a couple of ignites and even a cleanse now and again. If you main support and have played Zoe in the past and enjoyed her, you should definitely give this a go and see how you get on with it, because those who are playing it are winning a lot of games. The next underrated support pick is fairly similar to Zoe in the way that she plays, and that's Taliyah. Talia has always been known as this difficult champion to pull off that only really works when people really know what they're doing, and to a certain extent this is still true in that support role. But there's less to worry about when it comes to perfect jungle clearing or wave management, and it's more just about poke, burst and kill threat. Talia's Q offers some decent poke in the lane phase as you'd expect, and her WE combo packs a serious punch, and if you partner it up with an AD carry with some CC, it can be really hard to beat. Talia's W also works really well as a disengaging and peeling ability too, as if you time it right you can completely deny any enemy initiation. Talia's ultimate is also amazing at splitting up teams and cutting off your enemies, and in the bot lane if you see a jungler coming up to gank, you can line up to remove their escape, and if they don't have any flashes up, they're probably going to die. To add to all of these fantastic qualities, Talia's roaming and ganks are brilliant. The movement speed she gets from her passive and the strength of her ganks with her WE combo and her ultimate make her an absolutely brilliant pick from that support role in this current roam heavy meta. The third and final support and our last underrated pick of this video and this season is Rel. Rel is probably one of the weirdest champions in the game and has been since her release, and what I mean by that is the player base is divided into half the players thinking she's broken and half of them laughing at how bad she is. Well, Rel is defined massively by the player behind her, and she's just generally a very situational champion. If you need initiation and you've got big AoE damage on your team, Rel can be one of the best supports in the game. Rel's engage and ability to group up teams and lock them down makes her an absolute demon in the right hands, and as long as you land your CC, you're in for a real treat. The problem with Rel is the fact that she's very all or nothing, and due to the embarrassing movement speed debuff once she's committed, if it doesn't work, you're just gonna die. If you can play around this though and be really confident in your initiation, what a pick this champion can be. Rel currently has a very impressive win rate, and to be honest she actually has done all season because not many people really play her, but those that do generally know what they're doing. Rel when partnered with a Misfortune or Samira is a very fun combo to play with, so give her a go and you will not be disappointed. That brings us to the end of this video all about the most underrated champions to play in every role in Season 12. We hope you can agree with our choices and maybe learn something along the way, or maybe you've been encouraged to give some of these picks a go. Don't forget before you head off, click the link in the description and check out our website for all of the builds and guides you need to know for every single one of these champions. I've been your host Vale today here at Mobalytics and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching and take care.